My daughter Sarah called me crying at 11 p.m. just hours before her wedding. Through her sobs, I heard her fiancé Brandon's voice in the background, clear as day. "Tell your father we only want important people at our wedding. My family's connections matter more than some small-town nobody." The line went dead. I sat in my study staring at the contract for the $180,000 wedding I'd paid for. Then I picked up my phone and started making calls. The first time I met Brandon Whitmore III, he walked into my hardware store wearing a $3,000 suit and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. That was 18 months ago on a humid Tuesday afternoon when Sarah brought him to meet me for lunch. She was glowing in that way daughters do when they think they've found the one, and I wanted so badly to be happy for her. "Daddy, this is Brandon," she said, practically bouncing on her feet. "Brandon, meet my father, Gerard." He looked around my store with barely concealed disdain before extending his hand. His grip was firm but brief, like he was afraid the sawdust might contaminate him. "Sarah's told me so much about you," he said in that peculiar way people have when they're being polite, but don't really mean it. "All good things, I hope," I replied, wiping my hands on my apron. I'd been restocking bolts when they arrived, and I made sure to look every inch the small-town hardware store owner he expected to see. We went to Murphy's Diner down the street where I'd been eating lunch for 20 years. Brandon spent the entire meal name-dropping. Harvard MBA, this investment banking that his family's connections to senators and governors. Sarah hung on every word while I quietly studied the man who wanted to marry my only daughter. The proposal came 6 months later at the Whitmore family's country club. Brandon made sure to invite plenty of witnesses to his grand gesture, getting down on one knee right on the 18th hole as the sun set behind him. It was beautiful, I'll admit, and Sarah's tears of joy almost made me forget the way Brandon's mother, Constance, had spoken to our waitress at dinner the night before. "These people," she'd whispered to her husband loud enough for the young woman to hear, "really shouldn't be handling fine china if they don't know how to serve properly." My late wife Martha would have seen right through the Whitmores immediately. She had a radar for people who thought their bank accounts made them better than others. But Martha had been gone 5 years now, and I was left to navigate this alone. The wedding planning began almost immediately, and that's when things started to reveal themselves. Every decision became a battle, though Brandon and his family were clever enough to frame it as helpful suggestions. "Now, Sarah, dear," Constance would say at planning meetings, "I've made a list of appropriate guests from our side. The lieutenant governor, of course, and Judge Matthews, several CEOs from Franklin's firm. Very important people who could help Brandon's career." Meanwhile, Sarah's list kept getting shorter. Her fellow teachers from Roosevelt Elementary were deemed sweet, but perhaps not quite the right fit for such an elegant affair. Her college roommates were lovely girls, but wouldn't they feel out of place? Even her cousin Jenny, who'd been like a sister to her growing up, was questioned because she was just a nurse. I wrote check after check, watching the wedding transform from Sarah's dream into the Whitmores' networking event. The venue changed from the botanical garden Sarah loved to the Whitmores' country club. The band she wanted was replaced with a string quartet that had played at gubernatorial inaugurations. The simple, elegant dress she'd chosen was swapped for a designer gown that cost more than most people's cars. "It's important to make the right impression," Brandon would say, kissing Sarah's forehead when she seemed unsure. "This wedding is our introduction to society as a couple." I played my part perfectly. The quiet widower who owned a hardware store and didn't quite understand the ways of high society. I smiled and nodded and wrote checks, all while watching Brandon's family operate. They were good at what they did, I'll give them that. But they made one crucial mistake. They underestimated me. 3 weeks before the wedding, I hired someone to look into the Whitmores. Not because I'm naturally suspicious, but because something Brandon's father Franklin said at a dinner party kept nagging at me. "Money is just a game," he'd announced after his 4th scotch. The key is making sure other people don't know when you're losing. The private investigator I hired was a former FBI agent named Robert Chen, who'd helped me with corporate security issues many years ago, though the Whitmores would never know about that part of my life. What Robert found was illuminating. The Whitmore fortune was smoke and mirrors. 3 generations of wealth had been squandered through bad investments, lawsuits, and spectacular mismanagement. They were leveraged to their eyeballs, their country club membership 3 months behind their multiple homes mortgaged to the hilt. The only thing keeping them afloat was Franklin's investment firm, and that was hanging by a thread. "They're 1 bad quarter away from bankruptcy," Robert told me over coffee. "The wedding guest list reads like a who's who of potential investors. This isn't a celebration, Gerard. It's a business opportunity." But the real revelation came when Robert discovered Brandon's personal finances. Not only was he broke, but he'd been siphoning money from his firm's client accounts to maintain his lifestyle. Small amounts cleverly hidden, but it was there in black and white. "There's more," Robert said, sliding a folder across the table. Brandon's been in contact with estate lawyers about something called a spousal override clause. It's an obscure legal maneuver that would give him access to any trusts or inheritances Sarah might have, even if they're currently protected. My blood ran cold. Sarah didn't know about the trust fund Martha and I had set up for her. $10 million that would become hers on her 30th birthday, just 2 years away. Somehow the Whitmores had found out about it. That evening I started recording conversations. Just casual talks at family dinners, wedding planning sessions, quiet moments when people forgot I was there. It's amazing what people will say when they think you're just a harmless old man who doesn't understand their world. The most damning recording came the week before the wedding. I'd arrived early to the country club for a tasting menu session and was waiting in the lounge when I heard Brandon's voice from the next room. "After the wedding, we'll have access to the old man's money," he was saying to someone. "Sarah doesn't even know what her father's really worth. Once we're married, we'll move to Boston. She'll be so busy with the baby she won't even notice when we start limiting her visits home." "A baby," his mother's voice responded. "Is Sarah pregnant?" "Not yet." Brandon laughed. "But accidents happen especially on honeymoons. Once there's a grandchild, Gerard will do anything to stay in our lives. We'll manage the trust fund for Sarah's benefit, of course. The hardware store owner won't even understand the paperwork we'll have him sign." I sat in that leather chair listening to them plan my daughter's life like she was a stock portfolio, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not anger, exactly. Something colder and more focused. The same feeling I used to get when a competitor tried to undercut one of my stores back when I was building my empire. They thought I was just some small-town nobody. They were about to learn otherwise. After Sarah's call ended and Brandon's cruel words echoed in my mind, I sat in the darkness of my study for exactly 60 seconds. That's all the time I allowed myself to feel the fury burning in my chest. Then I picked up my phone and began dismantling the wedding piece by piece. The first call went to Thomas Garrett. Most people knew him as the owner of Garrett Event Solutions, the premier event planning company in the state. I knew him as my former chief operating officer, the man who'd helped me build a retail empire from nothing. He answered on the second ring despite the late hour. "Gerard, everything. All right." His voice carried the instant alertness of someone who'd fielded too many midnight crisis calls in his corporate days. "Tom, I need a favor. A big one. How quickly can you pull vendor contracts for an event?" "Depends on the event and whether my name's on anything. What's going on?" "Sarah's wedding tomorrow. Every single vendor needs to be canceled or redirected by dawn." There was a pause. Tom knew Sarah since she was in pieces, had bounced her on his knee at company picnics. "What happened?" "The groom just showed his true colors. I need this wedding to disappear." "Give me the details. I'll make some calls." The second call was to Judge Harrison Blackwood. Harry and I had met 40 years ago when we were both starting out, him in law and me in business. He'd become Sarah's godfather, and one of the few people who knew the full extent of what I'd built before I retired. Gerard, it's nearly midnight. What's wrong? His voice was gravelly with sleep. Harry, I need legal firepower. How fast can you get me access to financial records and freeze some accounts? I heard him sitting up, could picture him reaching for his glasses. Whose accounts? Brandon Whitmore and his family. They're trying to steal from Sarah. That little prick. I never liked him. Give me 30 minutes to make some calls. I'll have emergency orders drawn up by morning. My third call went to Margaret Chen, the attorney who'd structured every major deal of my career. She'd retired to Napa Valley, but still kept her law license active. This better be good, Gerard. I was in the middle of a very nice dream about my vineyard. Maggie, remember that spousal override clause you warned me about when we set up Sarah's trust? Don't tell me. Brandon's planning to use it. I have recordings. The silence on the other end was deafening. Maggie had 3 daughters of her own. I'll have my team file injunctions within the hour. That trust will be locked down tighter than Fort Knox by morning. Over the next 2 hours, my study became a war room. I'd pulled out contact lists I hadn't touched in years, calling in favors and activating a network most people didn't know existed. The hardware store owner facade I'd maintained so carefully was serving its purpose, but tonight I needed to be who I really was. By 2 a.m., Jennifer Walsh, my former assistant, who now ran her own investigation firm, had sent me a treasure trove of information. Brandon hadn't just been stealing from his firm. He'd been living a complete double life. Gerard, you need to see this, she said over video call, sharing her screen. Brandon's been in constant contact with his ex-girlfriend Victoria Pemberton. She's the daughter of Richard Pemberton, the pharmaceutical executive. Define constant contact. They meet twice a week at the Riverside Hotel. I have credit card record security footage, even some very explicit text messages. He's been promising to marry her after he divorces Sarah. The plan was to get your money first, then claim the marriage was a mistake. How long has this been going on? The entire engagement. Look at this. She pulled up a text exchange from 3 days ago. Brandon had written, "Just a few more days, baby. Once I have the old fool's money locked down, we'll be together. Sarah's so naive, she'll probably thank me for the divorce." Victoria had responded, "I can't wait. Daddy's already drawn up the investment papers for your firm. $50 million initial investment once you're single again." I felt sick reading it, thinking of Sarah's joy when she'd shown me her engagement ring. But there was more. Gerard, I also found something about the Whitmore family finances. They're not just broke, they're under investigation. The SEC has been building a case for months. Franklin's been running his investment firm like a Ponzi scheme. They need this wedding to happen because they've promised several major investors that Brandon's about to come into significant family money. Sarah's trust fund. Exactly. They've already taken deposits from these investors based on the promise of access to your money. If this wedding doesn't happen, if they don't get access to those funds, the whole house of cards collapses. By 3 a.m., the network I'd built over 40 years in business was fully activated. People who owed me favors, former employees who'd gone on to their own success, business partners who remembered when I'd helped them through tough times, all of them answered my calls. Marcus Thompson, who now owned the largest catering company in the state, listened to my situation and immediately offered help. You gave me my start, Gerard. Loaned me the money for my first food truck when no bank would touch me. Tell me what you need. You're catering the Whitmore wedding tomorrow at the country club. I need you to pull out. Consider it done. Food poisoning outbreak at my prep kitchen. Such a shame. Health department will need to investigate, could take weeks. Similar calls went out across the vendor network. Patricia Kim, whose flower shop had grown into a chain thanks to an early investment from me, discovered a sudden infestation that would require fumigating all her inventory. David Martinez, the band leader whose career I'd helped launch, came down with a severe case of laryngitis that would tragically affect his entire orchestra. But the masterstroke came when I called Richard Stone, my former chief financial officer, who now ran a major construction company. As it happened, his company held the deed to the Whitmore Country Club. Dick, remember that property analysis you did on the country club last year? The one showing foundation issues in the main ballroom. Sure, we estimated it would need major repairs within 5 years. Any chance those 5 years just became 5 hours? He chuckled. You know, now that I think about it, I've been meaning to schedule an emergency inspection. For safety reasons, of course. Wouldn't want anyone getting hurt if the ceiling were to suddenly develop some concerning cracks. Sarah called me at 4 a.m., just as I was coordinating with the last of the vendors. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her at first. Daddy, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. Sweetheart, calm down. Where are you? In the hotel bathroom. Brandon's asleep. I heard him on the phone with someone named Victoria. He was laughing about you calling you pathetic, saying I was too stupid to see what was happening. Daddy, has this all been a lie? My heart broke for her, but I kept my voice steady. Listen to me very carefully. Pack nothing. Don't wake him. There's a car waiting for you in the hotel's back entrance. The driver's name is James. He'll show you his ID. Get in and come home. But the wedding? There isn't going to be a wedding, sweetheart. Trust me. Just come home. Daddy, I'm scared. I know, baby, but I've got you. I've always got you. Now go quietly. After she hung up, I made one more round of calls. The security team I'd hired, all former military personnel who'd provided protection during my CEO days, confirmed they were in position. The legal team reported that all necessary injunctions had been filed. The media contacts I'd reached out to were primed and ready with the story of Brandon Whitmore's spectacular fall from grace. By 5 a.m., as the first hints of dawn crept across the sky, everything was in place. $180,000 worth of wedding had vanished into thin air, replaced by a carefully orchestrated disaster that would destroy the Whitmores so completely they'd never recover. I poured myself a cup of coffee and waited for the show to begin. The sun had barely cleared the horizon when Brandon Whitmore's phone exploded with calls. I knew because I was monitoring the situation from my study, receiving real-time updates from my network. The first call came from the country club at 6:45 a.m. Mr. Whitmore, this is Jonathan from the club. I'm afraid I have terrible news. The county building inspector has just condemned our main ballroom. Apparently, there are severe structural issues that pose an immediate safety risk. We have to cancel all events effective immediately. Brandon's voice, thick with sleep and confusion, crackled through the recording my security team was capturing. What? That's impossible. The wedding is in 5 hours. I understand, sir, and we're terribly sorry. Our insurance company is demanding we clear the premises. The fire marshal is already here. We can offer a full refund, of course, but that will take 8 to 10 weeks to process. Before Brandon could fully process this disaster, his phone rang again. Marcus Thompson delivered his performance flawlessly. Mr. Whitmore, Marcus Thompson from Gourmet Excellence Catering. I'm calling from the emergency room. We've had a severe salmonella outbreak at our prep facility. 14 staff members are hospitalized. The health department has shut us down and seized all our inventory as evidence. Evidence? What the hell are you talking about? I'm sorry, sir. They're treating this as a potential criminal investigation. Something about contaminated suppliers. I can't say more on advice of counsel. The calls kept coming, each vendor delivering their carefully scripted reason for cancellation. The florist discovered beetles in her imported orchids that required immediate fumigation by law. The photographer's entire equipment truck had been stolen overnight. The string quartet had been detained at the Canadian border, returning from a performance something about visa irregularities. By 7:30, Brandon was in full panic mode. I could hear him through the security feed screaming at his mother to fix this. How does an entire wedding just disappear? He roared. Get our lawyers on this. Someone's going to pay. Constance Whitmore, usually so composed, sounded shrill and desperate. I'm trying, but no one's answering. It's like they've all vanished. Meanwhile, wedding guests were beginning to arrive at hotels across the city. Senators, judges, CEOs, all expecting a lavish society wedding. Many of them were investors or potential investors in Franklin's firm, lured by the promise of joining a powerful family network. Instead, they found chaos. At 8 a.m., Sarah arrived at my house still in her pajamas, eyes red from crying. James, my driver, helped her inside, where I was waiting with coffee and her favorite childhood breakfast of blueberry pancakes. "Daddy, what's happening? My phone won't stop buzzing." "Don't answer it yet. First, we need to talk. There are some things about our family about me that I should have told you long ago." I handed her a leather portfolio filled with documents and newspaper clippings. Her eyes widened as she read headlines from the Wall Street Journal. Gerard Murphy builds retail empire from single store. Murphy's Market's IPO valued at $2.8 billion. CEO Gerard Murphy named to Federal Reserve Advisory Board. "This is you," she whispered, looking at a photo of me shaking hands with a former president. "I retired when your mother got sick. Sold most of my holdings, kept just enough to live comfortably and secure your future. The hardware store was partly therapy, partly a way to stay grounded. But mostly it was about giving you a normal life." Sarah's hands trembled as she found the trust fund documents. $10 million. Your mother wanted you to have security, but also the chance to find yourself without money complicating things. We were going to tell you on your 30th birthday. And Brandon, I handed her another folder, this one containing the investigation findings. She read in silence, her face cycling through shock, anger, and finally a cold determination that reminded me so much of her mother. "He was going to steal from me, from us. That was the plan. And last night when he said those things about you, he showed you who he really was. I'm sorry you had to discover it this way." Sarah set down the papers and looked me in the eye. "What have you done, Daddy?" "What I've always done. Protected my family." Back at the hotel, the Whitmores were descending into chaos. Franklin's investors were demanding answers about the canceled wedding. Judge Harrison had frozen their accounts based on evidence of financial fraud, leaving them unable to access funds to salvage the situation. Their credit cards were declining as banks received notice of the asset freeze. By 9 a.m., Victoria Pemberton had arrived at Brandon's hotel suite, dressed in what could only be described as a wedding dress. The security footage from the hallway camera was priceless. "Surprise, darling," she announced, bursting through the door. "I couldn't wait anymore. I know you were going to leave that mousy little teacher at the altar anyway, so I thought, why waste such a beautiful day?" The look on Constance Whitmore's face was pure horror. "Who is this woman?" "I'm Victoria Brandon's fiancé. Well, his real fiancé. We've been planning our life together for months now. Daddy's already got the investment papers drawn up. $50 million to start more once we're married." Brandon, still in his boxer shorts and yesterday's undershirt, looked like he might faint. "Victoria, what are you doing here? You said the plan was to humiliate her at the altar. I have the texts right here." She pulled out her phone, waving it around. "See, can't wait to see the look on her stupid face when I say I can't go through with it. That's what you wrote." Franklin grabbed the phone, his face turning purple as he read. "You absolute moron! Do you have any idea what you've done?" "It was your idea," Brandon shot back. "You said we needed her money." Their family implosion was interrupted by a knock at the door. FBI agents entered with warrants, having received anonymous tips about financial crimes, along with supporting evidence. The scene descended into pure pandemonium. At 10 a.m., Harry called me with an update. "Gerard, you're going to want to see this. The State Attorney General's office just announced they're investigating the Whitmore Investment Group for securities fraud. Apparently, someone sent them a very detailed package of evidence." "Imagine that." "There's more. The country club's board of directors called an emergency meeting. Turns out the Whitmores owe 6 months of back dues. They're being expelled effective immediately. Oh, and the Mercedes dealership just repossessed Constance's car from the hotel parking lot." By 11 a.m., the time when Sarah should have been walking down the aisle, the Whitmore empire was in complete freefall. 300 wedding guests were milling around various hotels, sharing gossip and shock. The wedding planners had informed everyone via mass text that the event was canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. Sarah had composed herself remarkably well. She sat with me in my study watching the news reports begin to trickle in. Local investment firm under federal investigation. Prominent society family facing financial ruin. Wedding of the year canceled amid fraud allegations. How do you feel? I asked her. She considered the question carefully. Free, heartbroken but free, and angry. So very angry that I almost married someone who could do this. Anger's good. It means you're processing. Your mother always said anger was just passion looking for a purpose. What would Mom have done? I smiled, remembering Martha's fierce protectiveness. Probably something similar, but with more style. She always had a flair for the dramatic. Sarah surprised me by laughing. Remember when that woman at the school tried to get Mrs. Rodriguez fired for her accent? Mom organized that whole diversity celebration and had the woman's own grandmother give a speech in Italian. Your mother believed in poetic justice. Is that what this is, poetic justice? This is just the beginning. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. Jennifer Walsh had sent security footage from the country club. Despite the evacuation orders, someone was sitting in the empty ballroom. It was me. I'd driven there an hour ago and let myself in through the service entrance. After all, my construction company owned the building. I sat in a single chair in the middle of the vast, decorated space, waiting. Sarah looked at the footage, then at me. You're going to face them. Every good story needs a confrontation scene. Can I come? I studied my daughter's face. The naive trust was gone, replaced by something harder but not bitter. She was her mother's daughter, after all. If you're sure you want to see this through. I'm sure. They tried to steal my life, my family, my future. I want to look Brandon in the eye when he realizes he lost everything. Then get dressed. Not in your wedding gown, wear something that says successful independent woman who dodged a bullet. She stood, then paused. Daddy, thank you for protecting me even when I didn't know I needed protecting. Always, sweetheart, always. As Sarah went to change, I received word that the Whitmores were heading to the country club, despite the closure, desperate to salvage something from the wreckage. They had no idea that the real show was about to begin. The security cameras at the club showed Brandon's rental car pulling up. He emerged looking haggard, his tuxedo rumpled his face unshaven. His parents followed along with Victoria, who was still inexplicably wearing her wedding dress. I smiled and straightened my tie. It was showtime. The grand ballroom of the Whitmore Country Club looked like a monument to abandoned dreams. 300 empty chairs faced an altar decorated with $20,000 worth of flowers that would never witness their intended purpose. I sat in the center of it all, hands folded, waiting. The Whitmores burst through the doors like a hurricane of desperation and fury. Brandon led the charge, his tuxedo shirt untucked, bow tie hanging loose around his neck. His parents flanked him, and Victoria trailed behind her wedding dress train, dragging across the polished floor. You, Brandon snarled when he saw me. What did you do? I remained seated calm as a lake at dawn. Hello, Brandon, Constance, Franklin, and you must be Victoria. I've heard so much about you. Don't play games with me, old man. Franklin stepped forward, his face mottled with rage. This is criminal interference sabotage. I'll have you arrested. On what charges? I pulled out my phone and set it on the chair beside me. Would you like to hear some interesting recordings first? I think they might change your perspective on who the real criminals are. Brandon lunged forward, but Constance caught his arm. She'd always been the smarter one. What recordings? Noi. I tapped the screen. Brandon's voice filled the ballroom, clear and damning. After the wedding, we'll have access to the old man's money. Sarah doesn't even know what her father's really worth. The blood drained from Brandon's face, as his own words continued. Every insult, every scheme, every casual cruelty played out in surround sound. The acoustics in the ballroom were excellent, I noted with satisfaction. "You recorded private conversations," Franklin sputtered. "That's illegal." "Actually, it's not." Sarah's voice came from behind them. She entered wearing a sharp navy suit, looking every inch the successful professional she was. Single-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, it's perfectly legal. Daddy was present for every one of those conversations. Sarah. Brandon's whole demeanor changed, shifting to the charming mask he'd worn for 18 months. "Baby, this is all a misunderstanding. Your father's confused. We can work this out." "Can we work out Victoria, too?" Sarah gestured to the other woman. "The one you've been sleeping with our entire engagement? The one you promised to marry after you divorced me and stole my inheritance?" Victoria had the grace to look uncomfortable. "You said she knew you said it was an arrangement." "Shut up," Brandon hissed at her. "Oh, please don't." I stood, finally walking to the projection screen that had been set up for the wedding slideshow. "This is just getting interesting. Would you all like to see some photographs? I have a lovely collection. Brandon and Victoria at the Riverside Hotel. Several times a week, it seems." The screen lit up with image after image. Credit card receipts, security footage, text messages that left nothing to the imagination. "You son of a bitch," Franklin growled. "Who the hell are you really?" "Someone you should have researched better." I clicked to the next slide, showing a Forbes magazine cover from 10 years ago. My face stared back at them under the headline, "Retail Revolutionary: How Gerard Murphy Built a Billion-Dollar Empire." The Whitmores stood frozen as I cycled through images: board positions, White House dinners, handshakes with Fortune 500 CEOs, the truth of who they'd been trying to con unfolding in full color. "The hardware store," Constance whispered, "is my retirement hobby. Rather relaxing, actually. Much more honest than what you people do for a living." "This doesn't change anything," Brandon tried to rally. "So you have money, so what, we'll just postpone the wedding?" "With what vendors?" Sarah asked sweetly. "The ones who've all blacklisted you, the country club that's revoked your membership, the one that's about to be demolished, by the way? Daddy's construction company found extensive structural damage. Such a shame." "You're destroying this place." "Converting it, actually. It's going to be a community center. Free programs for underprivileged kids. Your mother's portrait in the members gallery will make an excellent dartboard for the recreation room." Franklin's phone rang. He answered it, his face growing paler with each word. "What do you mean, seized all of them? That's impossible." "Oh, did I mention?" I pulled out a folder. "The FBI received some very interesting information about your investment firm. Something about using client funds for personal expenses and promises to investors based on money you didn't have yet. I believe the term is wire fraud." "You set us up," Brandon screamed. "No, you set yourselves up. I just made sure the right people knew about it." The doors burst open again. This time it was Richard Pemberton, Victoria's father, accompanied by several other men in expensive suits. They did not look happy. "Whitmore." Pemberton's voice boomed across the ballroom. "What the hell is this? My daughter calls me hysterical, saying something about the wedding being off. I've already transferred $5 million as a good faith investment." "Richard, I can explain." "Explain this." Pemberton held up his phone, showing a news alert. "SEC raids Whitmore Investment Group freezes all assets." The other men were checking their phones, their faces cycling through shock and fury as they realized their investments were gone. "You promised us access to Murphy family money," one of them shouted. "You said your son was marrying into one of the wealthiest families in the state." "He was," Franklin pointed at me. "We didn't know." "That you were trying to rob me," I suggested helpfully. "Yes, that must have been quite a shock." Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady and clear. "Gentlemen, I think you should know that Brandon was never marrying into money. He was attempting to steal it. Any promises made about my family's resources were fraudulent. I'd suggest you speak to your attorneys. The investors turned on the Whitmores like sharks smelling blood. Threats of lawsuits flew. Victoria was screeching at Brandon about her father's money. Constance was on her phone desperately trying to reach their lawyer, who seemed to have suddenly become unavailable. By the way, I added almost as an afterthought, Brandon, you might want to check with your firm. I heard they called an emergency board meeting this morning. Something about terminating you for cause and filing criminal charges for embezzlement. Brandon's phone buzzed. He looked at it and actually swayed on his feet. They fired me. They're pressing charges. They say I stole $800,000. $843,216 to be exact. I corrected. You really should have been more careful with those client accounts. How could you possibly know that? The same way I know about the forged documents you used to get into Harvard, the plagiarized thesis, the 3 other women you're currently stringing along in Boston, Chicago, and Miami. I do thorough research on anyone who wants to marry my daughter. The FBI agents who'd visited the hotel earlier entered the ballroom. Brandon Whitmore, we need you to come with us. You're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and securities violations. As they read him his rights, Brandon looked at Sarah with desperate eyes. Sarah, please, I loved you. This is all a mistake. Sarah walked up to him slowly, deliberately. For a moment, I thought she might slap him. Instead, she smiled. You know what the saddest part is, Brandon? I would have been happy being a teacher married to a hardware store owner's son-in-law. I didn't need the money or the connections. I just needed someone who loved me for me. But you couldn't see that, could you? You were so blinded by greed that you threw away something real for something you were never going to get. This isn't over, Franklin shouted, as his son was led away in handcuffs. We'll sue. We'll take everything you have. Harry Blackwood chose that moment to enter, flanked by a team of lawyers. Actually, Mr. Whitmore, I don't think you'll be suing anyone. You've just been served with lawsuits from 16 different investors, the SEC, the State Attorney General, and the IRS. Oh, and your wife's family trust is suing to recover the money you embezzled from it over the years. That's impossible. Constance's family trust is managed by a board that includes 3 of Gerard's former business partners, Harry finished. They've been documenting your theft for years, waiting for the right moment to act. Congratulations, Franklin. You're going to prison for a very long time. Constance finally broke, collapsing into a chair, with a wail that echoed through the ballroom. This can't be happening. We're the Whitmores. We're important people. No, I said quietly. You're parasites who confused wealth with worth and connections with character. You want to know who the important people are. They're the teachers like Sarah who shape young minds, the nurses you looked down on who save lives, the small business owners who build communities, the hardware store employees who help neighbors fix their homes. Those are the important people. You're just criminals in expensive suits. Victoria had been edging toward the door, but security guards blocked her path. Where do you think you're going? Sarah asked. This has nothing to do with me. I'm a victim here too. Really? Should we talk about the 3 other married men you're currently blackmailing with similar schemes? Oh yes, we know about them too. Your father's going to be very interested to learn how you've been using his name and money. Pemberton's face darkened as he turned to his daughter. Victoria, what is she talking about? I left them to their family drama and turned to Sarah. Ready to go. She took my arm and we walked toward the exit together. Behind us, the Whitmores' world continued to collapse in a symphony of accusations, arrests, and shattered illusions. Daddy, Sarah said as we reached the door. What happens to all this? She gestured at the decorated ballroom. Well, we've already paid for it. Seems a shame to waste it. What did you have in mind? I smiled. Remember Michael from your school? The one who's been bringing you coffee every morning for the past year? The one Brandon called that pathetic teacher with a crush? Sarah blushed. What about him? I may have invited him and the entire staff of Roosevelt Elementary to a celebration party this afternoon. Thought they might enjoy some five-star catering and champagne. After all, we wouldn't want to waste good food and drink on unimportant people." Sarah stopped walking and threw her arms around me. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, sweetheart. Now let's go celebrate your freedom with people who actually matter." As we left the country club for the last time, I could hear sirens approaching. More law enforcement, more consequences for the Whitmores' lifetime of fraud. But I didn't look back. I'd spent enough time on people who didn't matter. It was time to focus on the ones who did. The celebration at the country club that afternoon was unlike any wedding reception I'd ever attended. Instead of society's elite, the ballroom filled with the real heroes of our community. Teachers, firefighters, nurses, shop owners, and yes, the entire staff of Roosevelt Elementary School, including Michael Chen. Michael had arrived in his only suit looking nervously handsome and carrying a bouquet of wildflowers he'd obviously picked himself. When he saw Sarah still in her navy suit, but now smiling and radiant, his face lit up like Christmas morning. "Sarah, I heard about what happened. Are you okay? Do you need anything? I brought these for you. I know it's not much, but I thought—" "Michael," Sarah interrupted gently, taking the flowers. "They're perfect. Thank you." I watched them talk, saw the way Michael looked at her like she hung the moon, the way Sarah relaxed in his presence. No pretense, no calculations, just two people who genuinely cared for each other. Martha would have approved. But while we celebrated, the Whitmore demolition continued at breakneck pace. Harry Blackwood kept me updated throughout the afternoon. "Gerard, you're going to love this. Brandon's other girlfriends have all come forward. Turns out he promised to marry each of them too, after securing their father's investments. The FBI's now investigating him for running a romance scam." "How many victims?" 7 that we know of. All daughters of wealthy men. He had spreadsheets, Gerard. Actual spreadsheets ranking them by net worth and gullibility. Across the ballroom, I noticed Emma Whitmore enter quietly through a side door. Brandon's younger sister looked nothing like the rest of her family. Where they were all sharp angles and cold ambition, she had warm eyes and a genuine smile. She also had her wife Jennifer's hand clasped tightly in hers. I'd been hoping she would come. "Ms. Whitmore," I said, approaching them, "I'm glad you could make it." Emma's eyes were wary, but determined. "Mr. Murphy, I got your message. Is it true about the prosecutor position?" "Every word." "The state attorney general wants someone with inside knowledge of how families like the Whitmores operate. Your law degree from Yale and your estrangement from your family makes you perfect for the white-collar crime division." "They disowned me when I came out," Emma said quietly. "Said I was an embarrassment to the family name." "Their loss. Though I suspect after today it's their behavior that's the embarrassment." Jennifer, a tall woman with kind eyes, squeezed Emma's hand. "We saw the news. Brandon's all over it, and your parents are getting exactly what they deserve," Emma finished. "I've been documenting their crimes for years, hoping someday someone would listen." "I'm listening now. So is the Attorney General." Emma reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. 15 years of evidence. Every fraudulent deal, every bribe, every threat. I started collecting it the day they kicked me out. Why help us now? Because they destroyed so many people. Good people who trusted them. And because... She looked at Sarah, who was laughing at something Michael had said. "Because Sarah was the only one in your family who was ever kind to me. At that horrible engagement party, she found me crying in the bathroom after Constance said something vicious. Sarah hugged me and told me I was perfect exactly as I was. I took the flash drive knowing it contained enough evidence to bury the Whitmores completely. Thank you, Emma. And for what it's worth, you are perfect exactly as you are." As the afternoon wore on, more news trickled in. Franklin Whitmore had been denied bail after investigators found evidence he was planning to flee the country. Constance had been arrested at their mansion while trying to hide jewelry and artwork from asset forfeiture. Their homes were being seized, their accounts frozen, their entire life liquidated to pay back the people they'd defrauded. But the true poetic justice came when Richard Stone called with an update about the country club property. "Gerard, remember that homeless veterans shelter you mentioned? I've got the permits fast-tracked. We can start renovation next month." "Perfect. And the Whitmore family portrait gallery?" "Already removed. Though I saved Constance's portrait for a special purpose. Thought it might make a good cautionary tale in the ethics classroom we're building." The ethics classroom. I liked that. By 5 p.m., the party was in full swing. The string quartet miraculously recovered from their border detention played while people danced. The five-star catering, mysteriously uncontaminated after all, was served to people who'd probably never tasted $70 per plate food before. And in the center of it all, Sarah danced with Michael, both of them laughing like teenagers. "Mr. Murphy." A young woman approached me nervously. "I'm Jessica Martinez. I teach kindergarten with Sarah." "Of course, she speaks highly of you." "I just wanted to thank you. When my mom was sick last year, Sarah organized the whole school to cover my classes and even raised money for the medical bills. She never told us her family had money. She just helped, because that's who she is." One by one, people approached me with similar stories. Sarah tutoring kids for free on weekends. Sarah organizing coat drives for students who couldn't afford winter clothes. Sarah standing up to parents who bullied teachers. Sarah being the person Brandon and his family were too blind to see. "You raised a good one," Principal Anderson said, shaking my hand. "Though I suspect she gets it from you. That anonymous donation that built our new library. That was you, wasn't it?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I said with a wink. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, my phone rang. It was Jennifer Walsh with one final update. "Gerard, Brandon just made a call from jail. You're going to want to hear this." She played the recording. Brandon, sounding broken and desperate, was talking to his lawyer. "I don't understand how this happened. We had everything planned perfectly. How did he know? How did he know everything?" Mr. Whitmore. His lawyer's tired voice responded, "Did it ever occur to you to actually research Gerard Murphy? A simple Google search would have shown you who you were dealing with. He's just a hardware store owner." "No, sir. He's a man who built a $2.8 billion company from nothing. He served on Federal Reserve advisory boards. He's friends with senators, governors, and federal judges. And you tried to steal from his daughter. What did you think would happen?" But he seemed so ordinary. "That's what made him extraordinary. He didn't need to broadcast his importance. Real power doesn't announce itself, Mr. Whitmore. It just acts when necessary." The recording ended. I pocketed my phone and looked around the ballroom. Sarah had kicked off her heels and was teaching Michael to swing dance. Emma and Jennifer were talking to Harry about the prosecutor position. The teachers were taking selfies with the ice sculptures. The firefighters were arm wrestling the police officers, real people having real joy. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Whitmore Investment Group bankruptcy filing reveals $500 million in fraudulent losses. Below it, another, Brandon Whitmore facing 45 years in federal prison. I deleted the alerts without reading further. They didn't matter anymore. Gerard. Sarah appeared at my elbow, flushed and happy. "Michael wants to know if it's okay to ask me to dinner tomorrow. He's too nervous to ask me directly." "And you want me to give permission?" "What are you, 16? She laughed. "No, I just want to know what you think." I looked over at Michael, who was trying very hard not to stare at us while pretending to study an ice sculpture. "I think," I said slowly, "that a man who brings wildflowers instead of calculating their cost, who asks permission out of respect, and who looks at you like you're the only person in the room is exactly the kind of man your mother would have loved." Sarah hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Daddy, for everything, for protecting me, for letting me make my own mistakes, for showing me what really matters." "Always, sweetheart, always. As the party continued around us, I thought about the Whitmores, probably in holding cells by now, their empire in ruins, their important friends scattered like rats from a sinking ship. They'd wanted to fill this ballroom with people who mattered, people who could advance their schemes and feed their greed. Instead, we'd filled it with people who actually mattered. People who built communities, shaped minds, saved lives, and loved without calculation. Brandon had said we only wanted important people at the wedding. He was right. We got exactly what we wanted. He just never understood who the important people really were. 6 months had passed since the wedding that wasn't, and the Whitmore family's descent into infamy had become the stuff of legend in legal circles. I sat in the federal courthouse, Sarah beside me, as we watched Brandon's trial unfold. The man who'd once strutted through life in $3,000 suits now sat at the defendant's table in a borrowed jacket that didn't quite fit. Emma Whitmore, now lead prosecutor for the white-collar crime division, approached the witness stand with a thick folder. She'd transformed from the scared young woman her family had rejected into a formidable force for justice. Her wife Jennifer sat in the gallery, proud and supportive. "State your name for the record," Emma said to the witness. "Victoria Pemberton," came the sullen response. Victoria had traded her wedding dress delusions for an immunity deal, turning state's evidence against Brandon in exchange for avoiding prosecution herself. "Ms. Pemberton, please tell the court about your relationship with the defendant." Victoria's testimony was devastating. She detailed how Brandon had approached her at a charity gala, researched her father's wealth, and orchestrated their entire relationship around gaining access to that money. She produced emails where Brandon had literally scored potential targets based on their net worth and emotional vulnerability. "He called it the playbook," Victoria said, holding up a leather journal. "He had strategies for different types of women. The daddy's girl approached the career woman angle, the small-town sweetheart plan. Sarah was a small-town sweetheart with a bonus multiplier because her father seemed unsophisticated." I felt Sarah tense beside me. I took her hand and squeezed it gently. Emma continued methodically. "Please read the entry dated March 15th. Victoria read in a monotone voice. "S. Murphy is perfect. Teacher so naturally trusting. Father owns hardware store, seems simple. Preliminary research suggests significant assets hidden. Marriage will provide access. Note, must maintain relationship with VP as backup plan. Her father worth $50 million minimum." "And did the defendant promise to marry you as well?" "Yes. He said he'd divorce Sarah within 2 years and we'd live off both settlements. He had it all calculated in a spreadsheet." The gallery erupted in whispers. Judge Morrison, who I'd known for 20 years, banged his gavel for order. The trial continued for days, each witness adding another layer to Brandon's spectacular fall. His secretary testified about the embezzled funds. Former girlfriends shared similar stories of manipulation. A forensic accountant detailed how Brandon had siphoned nearly $1 million from client accounts to fund his lifestyle, while promising investors returns based on money he didn't have. But the most damaging testimony came from Franklin Whitmore himself. Broken by months in federal custody and facing 25 years for his own crimes, he'd made a deal to testify against his son. Brandon learned everything from us. Franklin admitted looking older than his 65 years. Constance and I taught him that money was everything, that people were just resources to be exploited. We showed him how to lie, how to charm, how to take what wasn't ours. I'm not making excuses for him, but we created this monster. Did you know about his plan to defraud Sarah Murphy? Know about it, we helped plan it. When we found out Gerard Murphy had money, real money, we pushed Brandon to propose faster. We needed that wedding to happen before our own frauds caught up with us. During a recess, I stepped outside for air and found Michael Chen waiting with coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said, handing me a cup. "Sarah's in the bathroom. This has to be hard for her." I'd grown fond of Michael over the past months. He'd proven to be everything Brandon wasn't: genuine, kind, hard-working and completely devoted to Sarah, without any ulterior motives. "How's she holding up at home?" I asked. "She has her moments. Sometimes she gets angry that she didn't see it coming. Other times she's grateful it ended when it did. But mostly she's focused on moving forward." "And you two?" Michael blushed. "We're taking it slow. I know she needs time after everything. I'm just happy to be part of her life." "For what it's worth, Michael, you're good for her. Martha would have liked you." "That means a lot, Mr. Murphy. I mean Gerard." We returned to find the prosecution presenting their final evidence, a video Brandon had made for his business partners, read fellow con artists where he bragged about his schemes. "The old man's totally clueless." Brandon's recorded voice filled the courtroom. "Thinks I actually love his boring daughter. Once I get control of her trust fund, I'll invest it all in offshore accounts. By the time they realize what's happening, I'll be in the Caymans with Victoria." The video continued with Brandon detailing exactly how he'd hidden assets, created shell companies, and planned to disappear with stolen millions. It was hubris at its finest, recording his own crimes for posterity. When the guilty verdict came down on all 17 counts, Brandon didn't even react. He'd aged years in months, his golden boy exterior cracked and faded. 45 years in federal prison. He'd be in his 70s when he got out, if he lived that long. As we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Sarah stepped up to the microphones with a composure that made me proud. "I want to say something to anyone who's been in my position," she said clearly. "Love shouldn't come with a price tag. It shouldn't require investigations or background checks. But when someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. I'm grateful my father had the resources to expose Brandon, but not everyone does. That's why I'm announcing the Martha Murphy Foundation for fraud victims, funded with the money Brandon tried to steal." The next phase of justice came at Franklin's sentencing. The man who'd once ruled boardrooms with an iron fist wept openly as the judge sentenced him to 20 years for tax evasion, securities, fraud, and conspiracy. Constance, charged as an accomplice, received 12 years. Their empire was liquidated with proceeds going to their victims. The country club had been transformed into the Murphy Veterans Center, and I made sure the grand opening coincided with Franklin being transported to federal prison. As his prison bus drove past, he could see veterans moving into rooms that had once been private dining salons, children playing in what had been the members-only pool, and his wife's portrait being used as a dartboard in the game room. But perhaps the sweetest justice came from an unexpected source. 3 months into Brandon's sentence, his prison job assignment came through. He'd been placed in the kitchen serving food to other inmates. His supervisor, a former client he'd defrauded, doing 5 years for a crime he'd committed, trying to recover the money Brandon had stolen. "Karma's a beautiful thing," Harry told me over lunch. "Brandon's apparently not popular in prison. Turns out a lot of inmates have families who got screwed by people like him." Sarah had thrown herself into the foundation work, partnering with law enforcement to educate people about financial predators. She still taught at Roosevelt Elementary, but now also traveled to speak at conferences about recognizing manipulation tactics. One evening, I found her in my study looking at old photo albums. "Mom would be proud of you," I said, sitting beside her. "I hope so. I just wish she could have met Michael. She would have loved how he makes me laugh." "She knows, sweetheart. Somewhere she knows." Sarah turned to a photo of our family at the beach back when life was simpler. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you think I'm naive for not seeing what Brandon was—" I chose my words carefully. "I think you have your mother's heart. You see the good in people, give them the benefit of the doubt. That's not naive, that's hopeful. Brandon took advantage of that hope, but that's his failing, not yours. I keep thinking about all the red flags I missed. We all miss red flags when we're in love. The difference is when you finally saw them, you had the courage to walk away, and you had family who would burn down the world to protect you." She leaned against my shoulder. "Thank you for burning down their world, Daddy." "Anytime, sweetheart, anytime." A week later, Emma Whitmore made national news by successfully prosecuting a senator's son for running a similar romance scam. She'd become the scourge of entitled criminals everywhere, using her insider knowledge to devastating effect. "I spent years ashamed of my last name," she told reporters after the verdict. "Now I'm reclaiming it. Every criminal I put away helps balance the scales for what my family did." The ripple effects continued. The Whitmore name was removed from building scholarships and charitable organizations. Their country club friends distanced themselves completely. The family lawyer was disbarred for helping facilitate their frauds. Even their household staff came forward with stories of abuse and withheld wages, resulting in additional civil suits. Victoria Pemberton didn't escape unscathed despite her immunity deal. Her father, disgusted by her involvement, cut her off completely. She was last seen working as a receptionist at a dental office in New Jersey, her dreams of easy money thoroughly crushed. But amidst all the justice being served, life also moved forward in beautiful ways. Michael proposed to Sarah at the elementary school's winter concert, surrounded by children singing off-key, but with enormous heart. She said yes, while the kindergarteners cheered and their parents cried. "I promise," Michael said, slipping his grandmother's ring onto her finger, "to love you for exactly who you are, to support your dreams, and to never ever calculate your worth in dollars and cents." It was simple, honest, and real. Everything Brandon's proposal hadn't been. The wedding, when it came, was small and perfect. Held in the school gymnasium, decorated by the students with a potluck reception organized by the PTA. Sarah wore her mother's wedding dress altered to fit. Michael wore the same suit he'd worn to the country club party, now tailored properly, thanks to a gift from me. Emma Whitmore attended with Jennifer, both of them welcomed as family. She'd legally changed her last name to her wife's, finally free of the association with her toxic relatives. During the reception, she pulled me aside. "I have news," she said quietly. "Brandon's been transferred to maximum security. He apparently tried to run a con on the wrong inmate. He'll be in solitary for his own protection for the foreseeable future." "I don't take pleasure in anyone's suffering," I said honestly, "but I do believe in consequences." "So do I. And speaking of consequences, Constance died yesterday. Heart attack in her cell. Franklin's requested to attend the funeral, but the judge denied it." I felt a strange mix of emotions. These people had tried to destroy my daughter, but they were still human beings who'd destroyed themselves with greed. "Make sure Franklin knows," I said finally, "that despite everything the Veterans Center has a grief counselor on staff. Even monsters deserve to mourn their losses." Emma's eyes widened. "After everything they did to you?" "Mercy isn't about what people deserve. It's about who we choose to be." As Sarah and Michael danced to their first song, surrounded by teachers, firefighters, nurses, and all the other unimportant people who made up their real community, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. Brandon had wanted important people at his wedding. In the end, he'd gotten exactly what he deserved, a courtroom full of the important people he'd wronged testifying to his crimes. Meanwhile, Sarah had filled her life with people who actually mattered, who valued love over money and character over connections. The Whitmore empire had fallen completely. Brandon's 45-year sentence would likely be a life sentence. Franklin would die in prison. Constance already had. Their fortune was gone. Their reputation destroyed, their legacy one of greed and disgrace. But from their ashes, so much good had grown. The Veterans Center housed 50 formerly homeless heroes. Sarah's foundation had helped dozens of fraud victims recover. Emma had found her calling prosecuting white-collar crime. And Sarah had found real love with a man who brought her wildflowers because he thought they were beautiful, not because he'd calculated their impact. As I watched my daughter laugh with her new husband, I made a silent promise to Martha. Our girl was safe, happy, and surrounded by love. The wolves who'd tried to devour her were locked away, their fangs pulled, their threat ended. Sometimes the best revenge really was a life well lived, surrounded by the people who truly mattered. 5 years have passed since that morning when Sarah called me in tears, and life has taken directions I never could have imagined. I'm sitting in my study now, the same chair where I made those fateful phone calls. But everything else has changed. The news is playing on the television muted, but with subtitles. Disgraced financier Brandon Whitmore denied parole for third time. The headline reads. The reporter mentions that he'd been caught running yet another scheme from prison this time, trying to defraud other inmates' families by promising legal help he couldn't deliver. Some people, it seems, never learn. Sarah enters with my grandson, 2-year-old Thomas Michael Chen Murphy, balanced on her hip. He has his mother's eyes and his father's gentle disposition, and he's wearing a tiny tool belt I gave him for his birthday. "Grandpa Jerry," he shouts, reaching for me. I take him gladly, marveling at how life continues to surprise us with joy after sorrow. "How was school today?" I ask Sarah. She's the principal at Roosevelt Elementary, now promoted after Anderson retired last year. The school has flourished under her leadership with test scores up and a waiting list for enrollment. Wonderful. The Foundation's new literacy program started today. We have volunteers from the Veterans Center reading to the kindergarteners. You should see these tough former soldiers doing voices for picture book characters. The Martha Murphy Foundation has grown beyond our wildest dreams. What started as a way to help fraud victims has expanded into educational programs, veteran support services, and community development initiatives. Sarah runs it all with the same quiet efficiency her mother had turning pain into purpose. Michael appears in the doorway home from his job as the district's curriculum coordinator. He kisses Sarah and ruffles Thomas's hair before turning to me. "Gerard, did you see the news about Emma?" "What news?" "She's been nominated for state attorney general, youngest in state history." I smile, thinking of how far Emma Whitmore Chen has come. She kept her family name hyphenated, as a reminder, she says, of where she came from and where she's going. Her conviction rate for white-collar crime is legendary. Last month, she successfully prosecuted a case that recovered $30 million for elderly fraud victims. "Oh, and this came for you." Michael hands me an envelope. "Looks official." Inside is a letter from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. Franklin Whitmore has died of complications from diabetes. He'd refused treatment in his final months, his lawyer writes, saying he had nothing left to live for. The letter asks if I want to claim any of his personal effects. I set it aside. There's nothing of Franklin's I want or need. "Sad?" Sarah asks, noticing my expression. "Thoughtful," I correct. "He lived his entire life chasing importance and died alone in a cell. There's a lesson there." Speaking of lessons, Sarah says the Veterans Center called. They want to name the new wing after Mom, the Martha Murphy Memorial Wing for Rehabilitation Services. My eyes mist. Martha would have loved that. Not a country club ballroom or a society page mention, but a place where broken people could heal and start over. The doorbell rings, and Michael goes to answer it. He returns with a young woman I don't recognize at first. Then she smiles, and I see it Victoria Pemberton, though she looks nothing like the woman in the wedding dress from 5 years ago. "Mr. Murphy," she says nervously. "I hope I'm not intruding. I've been trying to work up the courage to come here for months." Sarah stiffens slightly, but I gesture for Victoria to sit. "I wanted to apologize," she continues, "and to thank you. What happened 5 years ago destroyed my life, but it also saved it. I hit rock bottom, lost everything, and finally had to face who I'd become." "And who have you become?" I ask. "A social worker," she says with a small laugh. "I work with women trying to escape abusive relationships. Turns out understanding manipulation from the inside makes me good at helping others recognize it. I've been sober for 3 years, got my degree, and I'm trying to make amends." Sarah studies her for a long moment, then speaks. "You testified against Brandon. That took courage. It took necessity. I was just like him, using people for money. The only difference was I got caught first. Victoria pulls out a check. This is probably strange, but I've been saving to pay back everyone I hurt. This is for your wedding expenses. I know money can't fix what I did, but keep it, I say firmly. Use it for your clients. Consider it an investment in your redemption. Victoria's eyes fill with tears. Thank you. I don't deserve... None of us deserve grace, I interrupt. That's what makes it grace. After she leaves, Sarah shakes her head in amazement. Dad, how do you forgive so easily? Because holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Your mother taught me that. Besides, look what we have now. Would you change any of it? She looks at Michael playing with Thomas on the floor, at the photos of her students covering the walls, at the life she's built on a foundation of truth rather than deception. No, she says simply. I wouldn't change a thing. Later that evening, we have our weekly family dinner. The dining room fills with voices: Harry and his wife Emma and Jennifer, some teachers from school, a few veterans from the center, the manager of my hardware store, and his family. What had started as small gatherings have grown into these beautiful, chaotic meals where everyone's welcome. Remember when Brandon said he only wanted important people? Sarah says during dessert, raising her glass. Well, look around this table. A judge who fights for justice, a prosecutor who stands up to bullies, teachers who shape the future, veterans who sacrificed for our freedom, small business owners who build communities, parents who protect their children. These are the important people. To the important people, we all toast glasses clinking. Thomas, not to be left out, raises his sippy cup. Important, he shouts, making everyone laugh. After dinner, I walk through the house past photos chronicling our journey. Sarah's real wedding, simple and beautiful. Thomas's birth announcement. Emma being sworn in as prosecutor. The Veterans Center opening. The Foundation's first graduates. Life moving forward, building beauty from ashes. My phone buzzes with a news alert. Brandon Whitmore sentenced to additional 10 years for prison fraud scheme. I delete it without reading further. He's become a footnote in our story, a cautionary tale that launched 1,000 blessings he never saw coming. In my study, I find a letter I've been working on for the Foundation's newsletter. It's about recognizing emotional manipulation, protecting yourself from predators, and understanding that real love never comes with a price tag. I sign it simply, a father who learned that the best revenge is a life well lived. Sarah peeks in. Dad, we're heading home. But I wanted to ask you something. Michael and I have been talking, and we'd like to know if you'd consider moving in with us. We're buying the old Henderson place, plenty of room, and Thomas would love having Grandpa around all the time. I'll think about it, I say, but we both know I'll say yes. Family stays together. After they leave, I pour myself a scotch and sit on the porch watching the stars. Somewhere out there, Brandon's in a cell, Franklin's in the ground, and Constance's ashes scatter to the wind. Their dreams of power and prestige turned to dust, their legacy one of shame. But here in this small town, they looked down on among the people they dismissed as unimportant. Life thrives. Children learn, veterans heal, communities grow stronger. Love flourishes without calculation, kindness multiplies without expectation, and ordinary people do extraordinary things simply because it's right. Martha always said that we judge our lives not by what we accumulate, but by what we leave behind. The Whitmores left behind victims and cautionary tales. We've left behind schools and shelters, healed hearts, and second chances, a foundation that turns pain into purpose. As I head inside, I pause at Martha's photo on the mantel. We did it, honey. We protected our girl. And she's become the woman you always knew she could be. Somewhere in the night, a mockingbird sings and I smile. Tomorrow there will be new challenges, new chances to choose between greed and grace, between importance and impact. But tonight, surrounded by the evidence of lives well lived and love freely given, I'm content. Brandon wanted important people at his wedding. In the end, he taught us all exactly who those people really are. The ones who show up, who stand up, who lift up others without counting the cost. The ones who understand that real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the differences we make. The hearts we touch, the lives we change. The hardware store owner, the teacher, the veteran, the nurse, the ordinary heroes who make the world extraordinary, one small act of love at a time. Those are the important people. And we're all here building something beautiful together. To everyone watching who's ever felt dismissed, overlooked, or deemed unimportant by those who confuse wealth with worth, know that your value isn't determined by someone else's blindness. The most important people are often those doing the quiet work of making the world better, not those making the loudest noise about their own significance. Have you ever encountered someone who tried to use you for their own gain, only to discover that what they dismissed as unimportant was actually invaluable? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to hear more. Share it with someone who needs reminding that their worth isn't measured by someone else's standards. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May you always remember that the truly important people are those who value hearts over bank accounts, character over connections, and love over leverage. Until next time, keep being the important person someone needs in their life, even if others are too blind to see your worth.